Hello everyone, this is Yana Smakula for Pinkfresh Studio. Welcome back to our channel for another video tutorial. In this video, we are creating a Christmas card using the Holiday Express stamp set, coordinating stencils, and the coordinating dies. Let's go ahead and dive into this beautiful Christmas wonderland. So this is a look at the products we will be working with today. First up, we have the cling rubber stamp, and this one stamps the beautiful Holiday Express design. This is a red rubber stamp, a cling stamp, so if you use it in your stamp positioner in your MISTI, make sure to remove the insert from your stamping tool. Next, we have a set of coordinating stencils, and these will allow you to easily add color to your images. There are 2 sets of stencils, so there are actually 8 stencils in total. 3 stencils will coordinate with the coordinating die to cut the Christmas trees, and then we have 5 more stencils to color the Holiday Express. The Christmas trees can be added to enhance your scene, and they really add a lot to this image. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So here I have my MISTI stamping tool. This is the larger size MISTI. As you can see, I have removed the insert from the MISTI, so there's nothing there. I have placed a panel of hammermill cardstock. Now this is cut slightly larger, and I'm first going to stamp my image in clear embossing ink and heat emboss it using gold embossing powder. Now, the reason I'm using a larger sheet of paper is because, well, this image does not have any straight edges, if you will. I don't really know how I need to position it on a panel. If I were to cut my panel to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches to the size of an A2 card, and by the way, all of these products are designed to create a design or an image for an A2 card. So if I were to use or to start with an A2 panel, chances are I do not position the stamp exactly correctly. And when I go to ink blend, my ink blending might be a little bit off. Not off, but like it's not going to cover the A2 panel correctly. I hope I'm explaining this well, and I hope you guys understand what I mean. But basically, you want to start with a panel that is slightly larger, and you don't want to make sure that you do your stamping first and then you do ink blending. This is not one of those sets where you can ink blend first and then stamp the image on top of it, because the image, the stamp set, the stamp, it's not a clear stamp, it's a red rubber. You cannot see through the stamp, so you need to make sure to do the stamping first and then the ink blending. Okay, with the stamping done, I added the gold embossing powder. I did treat my paper with an anti-static powder tool. I stamped the image with clear embossing ink. I added antique gold embossing powder, and I heat set this using my heat tool. I let it cool for a few seconds, and we have this beautiful image ready. Now it's time to do some stenciling. There are 5 layers to ink blend this Holiday Express image. The stencil layer number 1 is rather delicate, and I have found that it needs some sort of repositionable adhesive for best results. I used Pixie spray. This is an old stencil adhesive spray that I have in my stash, and I reach for it whenever I work with stencils that require a little bit of extra hold. You can see my kitty walking by casually. He likes to join me from time to time. Please never mind him. He might make another appearance later on. I would highly recommend you use a spray adhesive for this stencil layer. It's going to make stenciling so much easier. I went ahead and I sprayed my stencil lightly from the back. I then test added it, so I adhered it a couple of times to a piece of scrap paper to remove some of that adhesive from the back, some of that adhesive residue, because I didn't want to have too much adhesive residue on my stencil. And then that's when I added it onto my main panel. You want to make sure to adhere it a couple of times to scrap paper to get rid of that adhesive residue, because sometimes, depending of course on the type of paper you use, but with this hammermill cardstock, it's super smooth, and I have found that adhesive from that spray adhesive likes to transfer onto the paper and likes to stay on the paper, leaving an unpleasant residue and a mark on my paper. So just make sure, you adhere it a few times onto scrap paper. Let's go ahead and start ink blending. I'm first using the Ballet Slipper ink to ink blend this first layer. I'm not doing a solid layer of color. I usually like to do that, but this time I decided I'm going to concentrate my color around the train and around that bridge. I feel like it looks best this way. I'm then bringing in a sparkling rosé ink. I'm using the same blending brush. This is a large blending brush, by the way. Love these blending brushes. They make adding color such an easy task to my paper and to my images. So I'm next using the sparkling rosé, and I'm adding a little bit of that hot pink or warmer pink or brighter pink in the center. For the next layer, this is stencil layer number 2, I'm once again using a large blending brush, and I'm blending with a light gray. This is Misty Coast. Now my blending brush, it's not a blending brush that is dedicated to this color. In fact, I have some leftover light yellow on this blending brush, and this actually allows me to create a warmer gray on my cardstock. I love to do this. I will often use a blending brush that has some leftover another color on it. And this way I can sort of come up with my own colors on my cards. Obviously, we cannot have a blending brush for every single color of ink. We would all want to have a dedicated blending brush for every single color, but it's not really possible. So sometimes we mix blending brushes, or we use the same blending brush for multiple ink colors. You can definitely clean your blending brushes when you switch between colors, but I don't always do that. I do that from time to time, but I don't do it always. And in cases like this, here you can see my blending brush is sitting on the side, and you can see there's like a little bit of that yellow there. So by mixing a little bit of yellow with gray, I was able to create a warmer gray. Okay, that is blended. Now I want to add a little bit of shading, and I'm using a slightly darker gray. This is Rocky Slopes ink, and I have switched to a smaller blending brush, and now I'm applying this ink where the bridge is covered by a hill, if you will, and also in a few other sections where I feel like the gray would be darker. Just something to add a little bit of additional interest to my card. And we can remove this layer and take a look. Beautiful. Okay, next we are blending stencil layer number 3, and this layer adds the color to our train. I wanted to have a light blue train, so I'm ink blending this using the waterfall ink. I'm using a large blending brush and a very light hand, and I'm applying ink mostly at the bottom of my train, fading it toward the top. So it's not really teal, it's not really light blue, it's more of a blue fading into white. Now for the stencil layer number 4, this one creates the roof of the train and also the front section of the train. I'm once again using that same ink, but a much heavier hand, and I'm creating a darker blue color. I will go back to this layer and I will reblend this with a light gray color to mute this light blue. It looked a little bit too vibrant for me for this particular card, so you'll see me do that a little later. Okay, we're now on stencil layer number 5, and this layer adds a whole bunch of detail to this image. One of those detailed pieces or images are the windows on the train. I wanted to show you that you can ink blend the windows yellow if you are ink blending a nighttime scene. You do need to be a little bit mindful about how you do it, because the windows will layer over the ink that you have used, or the ink color that you have used to ink blend the train. So let's say you ink blended the train using a dark green color, you won't be able to make your windows yellow. If you, however, kept your train a lighter color, like a light gray, or like I did here, a very, very light blue, you should be able to ink blend the windows yellow. I did use some pieces of packaging and pieces of acetate to mask the sections of the train and to be able to ink blend just the windows, because this stencil layer, this is again stencil layer number 5, it ink blends not only the windows but also additional pieces. So you do need, if you want to have, different colors for the windows, you need to be a little bit creative. You can also ink blend some windows gray to make it look like, you have light in some compartments or in some carriages, and then the other carriages are dark and perhaps people are sleeping there. So I wanted to be kind of creative and, show you different options. In the end, I ended up ink blending all of the windows using gray, just because that made more sense color-wise for my card. Yellow just didn't work well here. I had pink, I had gray, and I just didn't see yellow there. So I ink blended the rest of the windows using that Rocky Slope ink. I also used the Misty Coast ink to ink blend the other sections of the stencil. Again, this is stencil layer number 5. And I did directional ink blending, fading the color out. So I add a little bit more color in some sections and less color in other sections. With all of my masking and experimenting with the yellow color, I had a little bit of yellow where I didn't want it. And at first I didn't like it. I tried to fix it. I tried adding more color there, but later I decided I would add a die-cut tree and cover up that imperfection. Here I'm coming in with a Rocky Slopes, which is the darker gray, and I'm using a smaller blending brush to ink blend some of the sections on this layer. When you use a smaller blending brush, you have a lot more control, but it also takes you longer to apply color, especially if you are applying it to a larger section. At this point, I decided to go back to the roof of the train, and here you can see me reapplying the color. I'm using Rocky Slopes, and I'm ink blending with this color over that vibrant teal, and that dulls it quite a bit, making it a more suitable color for this card in this color palette. We're now done with the Holiday Express image, and I am moving on to ink blending the trees. With the trees, you have 3 stencil layers, and what you want to do is you want to ink blend the trees first and then use the coordinating die to cut them out. Here I'm using waterfall ink to ink blend the first layer. I used a large blending brush for that. You then align the second layer. You have little triangles on your stencils. These are super helpful because they tell you exactly where everything needs to go. And I'm ink blending the second layer using the turquoise ink. Again, that same blending brush. I didn't switch between the different blending brushes. I'm just using the same blending brush for both layers, and my trees are almost ready. I just need to ink blend the tree trunks, and for this I'm using the Gathered Twigs, which is a nice dark brown. I almost used my blending brush, my teal blending brush for that layer, but I realized in time that it was not the correct brush. I grabbed the correct brush. I'm using the smaller brush now, and I quickly ink blended the tree trunks. I did create 2 panels like this, and I cut both of them out using the coordinating die. Here you can see me adding the coordinating die onto the paper and taping it in place using a piece of low-tech tape. You want to make sure to do that so it doesn't shift in your die cutting machine while you do the die cutting. I also die cut another layer of Christmas trees or trees from blank white cardstock because I wanted to make my trees a bit sturdier. And now I'm using Barely Art glue to adhere the 2 layers together. So I'm adding an ink blended tree onto a blank white tree. I will next use white foam adhesive, the regular thickness, and I will add it from the back of my trees to be able to foam mount it onto my card. I also have the small trees, the little tiny trees, and those go behind my train up in the mountains, so they're far away, so hence why they're so small. I did use little pieces of thin foam adhesive behind some of the trees just because I wanted to layer them up. Technically, you don't really need to use it there, but I just wanted to add it onto my card. And you can see I have foam adhesive squares added behind the larger trees in the foreground. And I'm just going to go ahead, remove the backers from these foam squares and add them onto my panel. And this is starting to look so pretty. When you are adding the trees, you can also use them to hide any imperfections that you might have in your background. And that's what I did on the left-hand side there. I covered that ink blending imperfection. I went ahead and also added a sentiment to my card, and the sentiment reads, "Peace, joy, and love." I heat embossed it using the same embossing powder on white cardstock and cut it out using a coordinating die. And the sentiment comes from another stamp set from Pinkfresh Studio from the Festive Foliage Tree stamp. Lastly, I wanted to add some white dots. I wanted to create snow on my card. I usually will use a white pen for this, but I have misplaced mine, so I needed to find another solution. Here I have an opaque white watercolor, and I'm using a little ball stylus applicator. Usually you would use this product to score your paper, but I'm using it here to create a little white snow dots on my background. So I'm just dipping the stylus into the liquid watercolor. I'm picking up a little bit of that watercolor, and I'm then pressing with the stylus, with the watercolor, onto my paper. And this creates various size white dots on my background, mimicking snow. If I press just lightly, I have a teeny tiny dot. If I press a little bit harder, I have a larger size dot. And that just looks phenomenal because this gives me a little snow on my card, but it's like a controlled snow. I can definitely splatter this card using a paintbrush if I wanted to, but I like my snow to be a little bit more controlled. When I splatter, I tend to oversplatter and add too many dots and droplets. So this way I can, while it takes a little bit longer because I'm adding each dot individually one by one, but this way I have a lot more control and I can decide how many or how few of these dots I want. So here's a look at the finished card created with the Holiday Express products from Pinkfresh Studio. Thank you so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you again next time.